Welcome to the Married People Podcast, where we help you make marriage real, fun, and simple. Each week, we have honest conversations about one simple thing that can make your marriage better. Because when your marriage is better, everything's better. I'm CJ, and as always, I have the pleasure of sitting here with our resident newlywed, Afton.
Hi.
And our 22-year marriage veteran. He's an author, speaker, and the director of marriedpeople.org, Ted Lowe.
Hey, everybody.
And today on the Married People Podcast, we are asking the question, why do I have a problem with the word submit in my marriage? Now, Ted, I hear there's a little bit of drama around the word submit, but as a reminder to people listening who may not have know all of our stories just yet, like, I did not come from the church world. I came from outdoor retail. That was my background. That's what I was doing before I was sitting here. And so I don't know if you know this, but we don't talk a whole lot about submitting or the word submit when I'm like, rigging up a fly fishing rod. So it just doesn't come up in conversation. So I'm not as familiar with all of the drama and all of the thoughts around the word submit. So can you just kind of bring really me and anybody else who's in my seat up to speed?
Well, I think the drama mostly around the word submit doesn't come from Ephesians 5:21. It comes from later verses in that passage, and it's for wives to submit to husbands. So there's two different views when it comes to marriage. There's one that's complementarian that says, hey, that a woman is on this earth or in the context of marriage to complement her husband. She is his helper. So, I'm going to complement you. Another view is equalitarian that says we are equal. And so that's where the word submit, that's where the issue comes.
That's pretty deep, pretty quick here, Ted.
Pretty deep, pretty quick. But I think that's why there's energy around this. Because when you think about the word respect or the word submit, and you say to a wife, you need to submit to your husband, that feels parental to her. Mm-hmm. We respect our elders. We respect our parents. And so there's energy around that. But I think the thing that we can all get on the same page about, whatever the views are, and I know, people either don't have a view or they have a very passionate view about this.
Especially Christians.
Maybe probably only Christians.
for sure.
But Ephesians 5:21 says, submit to one another out of reverence for Christ. So wherever you land on this continuum of, the men's role in the house or head of, wherever you land on this whole thing, at the end of the day, we're all can agree, I think, that we are called in Ephesians 5:25. It's really clear. It says, submit to one another out of reverence for Christ. So it's this whole idea of, when you think about your marriage, that great marriages are made up of two people who are going, you first, no, you first, no, you first, no, you first. And at the end of the day, as every time on this podcast, we've tried to wrestle with the tension I think we need to really wrestle with here is, why is it so difficult for us to submit?
Yeah, because, if you're someone like me who hasn't given the theology a whole lot of thought, or maybe you're listening and you've never heard those verses, or you're not a Christian or whatever, like, some people live in that tension of like, what does my theology say about this? But regardless of your theology, all of us wrestle with the tension of just like, submitting is not what I want to do, right?
Right.
And I think, too, as the woman at this table and as someone that grew up in the church and went to Bible college, I feel like submit is such a loaded word for women in general. So even when women hear the phrase submit to one another or mutual submission, there's so much drama around the word and all these connotations that come into your brain. And I feel like women, or probably just me, maybe just me, I wish there were 50 other women in this room that could tell their own stories of what this means to them. But I feel like for me, I just feel combative with the word in general. I'm like, I don't like what that means. I don't like that I feel like I have to do, make myself lower or whatever. And then I have all of these combative feelings towards the word submit, right? And I'm thinking all of these things way before I'm married, like going through Bible college and being in ministry for so long. You feel those feelings and you feel like you have a really good stance on it. And then I got married, and I feel like after I got married, my whole mindset around the word submit changed, because I viewed it before I got married as like this, like, that's not fair kind of thing. And then when I got married, I'm like, that's 100% fair for both of us. Like, if that's what I want to do. Like, I want to wake up every day, and because I love him so much, I want to put him first every day. So I feel like for women, it can be like, I just don't even want to talk about the word submit for some of us. And I think in actuality and in practice, and when you actually get into a marriage, some of that is kind of disarmed because you're just overwhelmed with this love for another person and you just want what's best for them all the time. And it almost becomes a natural response to put that other person first.
Yeah. Well, so you really kind of started with, you had a lot more thoughts about this theologically, which were diminished almost when you got married.
Which was really actually surprising for me because you guys know that I have very strong opinions about basically everything.
Noticed.
Like every single thing in the world I have a very strong opinion about. And so I thought I had it like all worked out about how marriage was supposed to look until I got married, and then I felt like everything changed. And I think it changed too because I witnessed Hudson submitting to me, and that almost made me go, well, now I want to submit to you. And when I say submit, I don't mean like I'm just like laying over and letting him make all the decisions or he made, I mean like he puts me first so much every day, and in response, I want to put him first too. You know what I mean?
Well, I want to bounce off that really quickly. You said what you mean by submit, and because I don't want to get too much further in this episode, Ted, without you explaining what the word submit even means, because it is kind of it does have whatever connotations it has. For someone sitting in my seat, it has a biblical or a theological connotation because we don't use that word too much in our everyday life.
That's
so
true.
What does, when we say submit, how do you define that? What does that even mean, really? And then, obviously we have problems with it. We're sharing some of those, but what's the deal with the word submit here? Well,
I think you make a very, very important point that even using the word submit is not part of our cultural language. It's not, we don't talk to our kids about it. We don't talk about marriage about it. And, when I think about the consistency of Scripture, or the thread that makes it all line up, is that authors would be writing to people about, here's how the culture is impacting your relationships with each other and with me. And so I think in our culture, when I talk to people about their marriage that are believers, they don't talk differently than as if I was having a conversation with somebody that didn't have faith. And I'm talking about people that I love dearly. I'm listening to them and I think, wow, there's an absence of your relationship with Jesus in this. And, I don't want to say that in any kind of condemning, judgmental way. It's just true. Culture, when you start hearing people talk about their marriage, it has impacted. And so they're talking about things like, I don't get all my needs met. I keep trying to communicate what I need and he won't give it to me, or she won't give it to me. We say things like, this isn't what I've signed up for, or she's changed or he's changed. And it's these things that feel totally absent from faith. And here's what's so crazy about it. I've heard it so much, I start counseling out of that same mentality. She says, I need him to communicate with me more. I try to work with him to help him talk better. She won't have sex. And again, I don't mean to be stereotypical, but she doesn't want to have sex as much as I do. I start talking to them about scheduling sex. I want to go, wait, pause. And I think that's what we've done today on this podcast, is to pause and say, wait a minute. God's call for us as believers. Now, if you're not a believer and you're listening to this right now, you're off the hook. Although what we're going to talk about is great for any marriage. But as believers, that we are called to this crazy thing of putting our spouse ahead of ourselves. And the reason we do that in the same verse is submit to one out of reverence for Christ. It's, I'm going to do this because of what Christ did for me. I'm not reacting to my spouse. I'm reacting to God and what he did to me. And what I think about this, even as I'm raising teenagers, I keep hearing this verse is, while we were still sinners, he died for us. Like to say, I need to die for my kids, my wife, and my family because he died for me. So CJ, I think that's one of the things is we don't have this word in our culture. People don't talk about this, but to use Andy Stanley's phrase, marriages that work, that are different, are ones where the couples are racing to the back of the line. I'm going to put you first. And the tension I think we can all sit in right now, no matter where people are with their faith or in their marriage, is this is tough.
And you don't want to. When it comes right down to it, like, as human beings, it is not just a natural inclination to be like, me last. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like,
No.
I knew, like, when I went into marriage, I was like, I feel like I'm still a really selfish person. And I think that's part of what marriage does to you is, like, when you're by yourself, you're able to just make it all about you. You're able to be very selfish. You're able to, like, put yourself first all the time. And when you get married, it's like you have to start changing that mindset. And it's just, it can be very difficult.
Yeah, for sure. I think so. Out of what you just shared, Ted, and what you just shared, Afton, kind of where I'm sitting here is okay. I'm wrestling. There's a lot going on in my mind. This was a lot to process
For you to learn today, CJ.
And so I'm kind of where I'm at this point is the word submit. Like you just said, Andy Stanley said, is the word submit in a marriage is really just a race to the back of the line. And where I'm at right now is almost reframing the question of this episode. Why do I have a problem with the word submit in my marriage? And I'm like, okay, this makes now more sense if I insert that phrase. Why do I have a problem racing to the back of the line in my marriage? Would that be a fair, to switch that out?
Yeah, absolutely. Why do I have a tough time? And you think about this. For me, to race to the back of the line means Nancy makes a comment or says something, or she's having a frustrated day. The way I submit to that is just let her have that. Like, just let her go. You know what? It's not really about me. And even if it is, lots of grace. We've got 3 busy kids. I see that she's exhausted, but it's her day, quote unquote, to go pick up the kids. I need to get in the car and go pick up these kids. It is putting them, serving them. I think this is when we think about serving each other, I think maybe more than any place that this is it, that I'm going to serve you ahead of me.
So why is this important then? Why is the idea of submitting to your spouse important? Because what I'm hearing is it just sounds like I'm just being nice. Just be nice. And I know we talk about that a lot, but is there something bigger that I need to feel or realize because the word submit is a heavy word too. Right. And I don't think it is just like, why do I have a problem being nice to my spouse? Right. It's different.
Oh, it's deeper.
And it's bigger than that. So what is different and why is this so important? What am I missing here? Does that make sense? That was a lot of rambling, I feel like.
No, when you think about this thing being out of reverence for Christ, like this is where
where does that come from? I want you to slow down just a little bit. And I know you said it somewhere.
It's Ephesians 5:21.
So we're talking about the verse where the word submit comes from.
Like this is how we do marriage. This is how we do Christian households. Paul is writing in Ephesians, and he says, submit to one another. Here's why: out of reverence for Christ. That solid households, solid faith-driven households are ones that are based on where there's mutual submission, that people are submitting to one another. We talk about almost every episode about what does it look like when other people see our marriage. And when they see this submission, that it's a great reflection of Him. And it's our way of saying back to Christ, hey, I recognize what you've done for me. I'm going to die to me when it's really tough. When it's really tough. This isn't about nice guy stuff. This is about when it's really tough, when the world would say they were absolutely wrong. You could come after them and boy, you were right and they were wrong. And anything you say that sheds light on how wrong they are, that's a thumbs up from a cultural standpoint. Where it's different for us as believers is we're dying in those moments, dying in those moments when we want to say things, because especially when we're right, quote unquote, especially when we know that there's something rich happens. And a lot of times I think it's helpful if you pull this out of the context of marriage, because sometimes we can't see the forest for the trees. But think about those people in your life that you watch that put other people's needs ahead of their own. Mm-hmm. Are we drawn to them or repelled from them? So from the selfish standpoint of just wanting a better quality of marriage, after it's like what you said earlier, when I got married, it was different because he so submits to me, it makes me so want to submit to him. Mm. You can see how it's mutual. That's the mutual thing, that you're getting in this cycle of you first, no, you first. Our kids will actually say to this, and we don't have it all figured out, but we've learned something to this principle. Our kids will say, the only time we hear you guys argue is who's going to do something. They will hear us go, no, I'll go get him. No, I got it. And we can truly get into, no, you're tired, blah, blah. I got it. I'll go get, So that's what our kids, because it has been that race to the back of the line. Not always, but it has been something that we've watched and we've learned from really great couples that we feel like we're called to do.
That's so intimidating, Ted. Like, I want to have that where it's like we only argue about you first. I like wish that were a reality in my house right now, but it is not. And it's like, wow, wouldn't that be nice if the things we argued about were actually to put each other first and not like these little trivial things that don't actually matter.
Well, and in name of not getting struck by lightning right now, let me just say to you, that's the only arguments they hear. So say that, right? And so when we have those things where I feel like, again, I've talked about this a lot, when I feel she's been unkind or whatever, when I get defensive. And listen, we totally have our moments for sure.
Yeah.
But I think when you have those moments, you start having them less and less, and now you've got a grid of apology to go and went, oh, that was me. Mm-hmm. And that's part of submission too, is the apology part, is you submit that, oh, I shouldn't have done that.
Yes.
Yeah, so please don't hear me that think that's our kids' perspective. But it is something when it comes to serving each other that I think we've landed on. We've learned how to serve each other pretty well.
So what's at stake, Ted, if we don't get this right? Because again, I'm still like, I get it still feels like, oh, it's kind of just a nice thing to do, the submit thing. And then I hear, you talk about your kids, and I'm like, oh, there's a little bit more of what's at stake. Your kids are seeing some of this. It's kind of reflecting in a good way on your kids, or maybe maybe to my friends and that kind of a thing. And I get the phrase reverence for Christ, but that's a big idea that I don't always know what to do with, right? That feels bigger than what I can do right now this afternoon. Like, how do I, submit to Terry in reverence for Christ on our date night? That is just like, it feels weird. But what's at stake, if that makes sense?
Yeah, I think when we do things out of reverence for Christ, kind of what is at stake at that moment is our relationship with God, how we feel about Him, how we think Him, what we feel entitled from Him, what we feel like it's fair or not fair. Like when we're living in Western world a little bit, we can start talking like everybody else. We have one of the lines at our house, we've got rich people problems, or this is first world problems. That there's a perspective that changes. So I think what's at stake on this one, again, we talk a lot about your relationship with each other. I think what's at stake here is our level of intimacy with God, with Christ, is that connection to say, wow, this really is my visible way of thanking an invisible God for what He's done. So it is, I think that's at stake. If we got totally selfish with this whole thing, I think what's at stake is the quality of your relationship. That when we have selfish friends, they're not our friends for long, right?
Mm-hmm.
Why? Because it's relational deal killer. Like you're just like, ugh.
And by dill, you mean deal killer?
Dill, like dill is
I also thought dill pickle.
Like did I? Well, the Alabama comes out quite often.
I just have to call it out every.
The deal, and by deal I mean deal. You know what I'm saying? The deal, the deals go down. CJ,
it's a relational deal killer.
It does. Not when we're selfish. Does it push your spouse away, or does it draw them to you? It pushes them away. When we do something great for them, are they drawn to us, or are they repelled from us?
I think as I'm sitting here processing what I'm getting out of this is a great way to make my marriage, my relationship with Terry look different, kind of elevate it in a unique way above every other relationship I have. Like all of my relationships with friends, coworkers, family, it's just, we're serving, we're being nice to them. It's, there's that level of cordialness, but then I feel like this verse is like submit to one another out of reverence for Christ. Like that's different. And that's a different level. That's like level up, level 2. Here we go.
Sure.
That kind of a thing. That's kind of what I feel like. And I feel like God is trying to encourage us to make that really reflect what he does with us and the church in a unique way. Does that make sense?
It does. And normally CJ does this part, but I just want to ask the question now because I'm very curious, just as we're talking about this conversation, is like, I really don't know 100% what it looks like. I mean, I know when I offer to do things for Hudson that I don't have to do, or I know when, I let him pick the flavor of ice cream we get from Kroger instead of the one I want. I mean, those are the things that are popping into my head. But now CJ's like, it's a very deep thing. And I'm like, is letting him pick pistachio
out
ice
of reverence
cream,
for Christ.
Is that part of this conversation? I mean, like, what does it look like practically, Ted, when you talk about like submitting in a relationship? Like, are you talking about submitting like when it comes to opinions or when it comes to the schedule or when it comes to, what does it actually look like for you?
And before you answer that, Ted, is it more of those little things like Afton's saying, or is it that and like there's almost like an air about it or an attitude about it?
I love that.
Because the word submit makes it seem so big.
Right.
Yeah.
And so it feels like...
And I'm like, do I even do that?
I love that. There's an air and there's an attitude. And I think that's what we're talking about. First of all, allowing your spouse to pick the ice cream, that's a big moment for me. So
yes.
let's don't downplay, Bluebell ice cream for 1 second. I think it is those little moments. It is those little micro moves. It is those moments of, I want you to have this. I want to see the look on your face. It's those differences. Like for instance, if you're an introvert married to an extrovert and you go to a party and you have submitted to how they're wired versus how you're wired. And so when we're sitting there in my own flesh and I'm looking at my extroverted spouse having this great time and I go, is this working for me? Well, right now this isn't working for me. If I look and is this working for her? Oh, wow, is it working for her? She's getting so much life out of this. Those are moments of submission to go.
And it's your attitude in that moment.
It is 100% attitude. It's not just when our mouths say yes and our hearts say no, no one's more miserable. If your mouth says yes to the party and your attitude is no, an extrovert will say, why'd you even bother? And I think it is an air and it's an attitude. And when you're talking about out of reverence for Christ or as a reflection of Him, like when people see that, when people see us talking well about each other, when we see each other, making sure I know that he loves to do this, I know that she loves to do this. Our good friends, Jeff and Sherry Surratt, who we'll have on this podcast, she was telling me about that her and Jeff had just gone on a vacation, just the two of them. And she said, my goal was to make this the best vacation he had ever had. And they've been married for 30 years? And I thought, wow, she's still thinking through what it means to submit. And not in a way of you're the boss of me,
right,
but in the way of, oh man, I want him to know that I love him. And she's, we had the best vacation ever. So I think it's those moments. It's not the thing that we've made it like, parental or you're the boss or you have all the right ideas.
It's better than that.
It's better than that. I love that, CJ. Yeah, it's better than that. And it's richer than that. And it's more important than that. It is an air and it is an attitude.
I thought you were growling at me for a second.
No, it's better than that.
Preaching, CJ.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
Christian mooing.
I got 3 moos today. That's great. Now, Ted, this is a huge idea, and we went super deep, in moments here. But all of this has to boil down, like we always like to do, it has to boil down to one simple thing. And it, practically speaking, if you're trying to put handlebars on this, it has to boil down to something. So is there a one simple thing this week? Could there possibly be a one simple thing?
I think the one simple thing, this week is to declare one day this week as a race to the back of the line. Like for you to say, one day this week, when you're going to have a lot of interaction with your spouse, I'm going to declare this day the race to the back of the line. And you'll see these situations where it'll, hopefully come up. If this is out of reverence for Christ, and we don't talk about this a lot, but maybe, you'll say, God, show me what that means. Like, what does that look like? How do I do that well? And if it feels good this day, then re-up the next and just start watching how this matters. And a part of this submission is I'm not doing it out of any reaction from them. Like it might be great that, and they were so drawn to me. That could be great, but it's really not a reaction to them as much as it is a reaction to Christ.
Well, I think that's great. And I mean, if I'm being, so again, to reiterate what Ted just said about the one simple thing, it's declare one day, maybe it's Friday, Saturday, Sunday, whatever it is for you, declare one day a race to the back of the line day, and work hard to win that race. You know, you don't even have to tell your spouse is kind of what I heard you saying. You just do it. They might not even be racing too.
Right.
You just do it yourself.
You win the race when you lose the race.
Oh, wow. That's so profound. After.
Another Christian move goes out to Afton.
You got one move. No, but now if I'm being really honest, this just feels like you're just telling me to be nice again and put her first, put Terry first.
After all this, you said it was so much better. Don't go backwards on me.
But no, I'm not going backwards.
Okay.
But what I'm saying is it does feel that way. But then I have to remind myself that this is a huge concept, and this is one way to practically get that ball rolling. Like it has to start somewhere, and here's a great place to start. Does that make sense? Because if you're hearing this, you're like, oh, I got to race to the back of the line. I got to be nice to my spouse. But hey, it's like there's an attitude about this, and hey, it has to start somewhere.
Well, and I think the difference is it's like, don't just be nice to your spouse. It's like we're getting our motivation not from ourselves, but from what someone else has done for us. And it's like, if that's our motivation, that will make this, letting them choose the ice cream, be a lot easier for us to swallow. You know, it makes it so much easier for us to be unselfish that day.
Makes the ice cream easier to eat.
Yes, with that pistachio ice cream, so much easier to eat when there's no chocolate in it. When you know that someone else did something huge for you, it makes it easier for you to be
I'm eating this ice cream out of reverence for Christ.
Out of reverence for Christ.
Something about it, it's sitting in my spirit, feels great about going, I'm going to do something with zero expectation of her reaction. You know, because I'm all about like, how is this work in my marriage? How does this work?
Right.
There's something so freeing to think about that, to go, I don't care what they do.
Yeah.
Isn't that kind of fun?
Right.
Like to go, oh.
Because it's more about you becoming who Christ wants you to be than it is about really your marriage in general. It's about you being who Christ wants you to be. And then there are ramifications that make things so much greater.
Yeah. Wow. That's good. Well, that was a great way to end the podcast, Afton.
Thank you
so much.
You're welcome, CJ.
That's
I
awesome.
told you that in 2018 I'd be more mature.
Mature and
I
not
love that.
manure.
Well, but seriously, this is a great way to start practicing mutual submission, racing to the back of the line. And over time, again, I'm just kind of thinking through this, like over time, if I did this one Saturday and then I did it the next Saturday, I'm like, over time, you would start to feel the needle move in your marriage, you know, from wherever it is, you know, and that's a really cool thing. So thank you guys for having this conversation with me, and thank you for joining us for the Married People Podcast. We hope that today's episode helped you realize that marriage is a little easier than you think. And if you enjoyed this episode, we would love for you to subscribe to the podcast on iTunes. And while you're there, you could leave us a review, or wherever you're listening to your podcasts, we would love for you to review it. Your review will help us make this podcast better and get these conversations in front of more married couples who need to hear them. And finally, for more great resources to make your marriage better, check out Ted's book. He wrote a great book. We talk about it every week, but it is really, really a great book. It's called Your Best Us, and you can find it on Amazon, wherever you buy your books, or at marriedpeople.org. That's also where you will find the show notes for this episode. And we look forward to having you back next week. Until next time, I'm CJ.
I'm Afton.
I'm Ted.
And thank you for listening.